break. Congress suddenly found $1 billion to give Israel for its Iron Dome missile defense system, which, to be clear to our viewers, is already fully funded. This was a $1 billion cherry on top. The majority of the squad, Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, voted against it. Jamal Bowman voted for it, and he told me on this show the other night it's because he wanted to represent his diverse constituents. You voted present, despite having criticized other House members in the past for voting present. I know you put out a statement addressing this, but can you just briefly explain to our viewers on MSNBC tonight why you voted that way? Because I'm sure you know you've come under a lot of criticism for that present vote, including from supporters of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was an extremely difficult vote, and I also think it's important that people are educated about the process of this vote. That Democratic leadership decided to fast-track this funding. So when you want funding for preschool here in the United States, if you want funding for any sort of domestic priority, it must go through what feels like 80 different committee hearings, markups, etc. And here, just casually, $1 billion was fast-tracked, no committee markup. In fact, earlier that week, leadership attempted to kind of slip in an extra $1 billion into routine legislation, and I was part of the Democrats that helped to remove it because this is contentious. Now, what became very difficult during the course of the week was that my district is adjacent to Representative Bowman's, and this began to, frankly, just really become quite contentious in our community, in part due to the disingenuous messaging that both parties were advancing. You are correct in that this funding was in addition to the already fully funded Iron Dome, but Democratic leadership decided to run with the narrative that this was, in fact, to vote against it was to defund the Iron Dome, which sent many of our constituents into a panic. They called this vote, they scheduled the vote 2 hours. They called the vote 2 hours after it was announced that it was scheduled, and that lack of timing created a very volatile environment back in the district. And so it's something that has been obviously very difficult, but the question, that is what happened that day.
Congresswoman, the question that a lot of people ask me to ask you this is, was it worth doing present? Because it didn't really satisfy anyone. The supporters of Israel are mad at you for not voting for it. Critics of Israel are mad at you for not voting against it. Do you regret that?
You know, it is something that I weigh because there's always the macro and then there's the micro. And in the macro of narrative, of politics, of national impact, I probably should have just gone with my value. But in the macro, which would be to vote no. But in the micro, I do believe that this created a window in our community to be able to bring all folks to the table, because my great fear is that we are going to import the same sort of contention around this issue, and we can have a progressive movement that defends Palestinian human rights, that is Muslim, Christian, Jewish. So in the micro, I believe that it created a window of opportunity for us in the Bronx. But in the macro, it was very difficult, yes.